So, welcome to another week. I'm Mike Scarpa. If you don't know me or you haven't been here before, Richard, I think this may be your first time coming, so thank you for coming. Um, so, hey Jen, how are you? So, what we're going to do today is we're going to go over lease options, why they're a great strategy to sell a house, and also why it's a great strategy to also buy with them. Typically, we do sell with them, but I'm going to explain both sides. So, I don't know if either one of you are landlords, if you have rentals, if you've ever dealt with them, but sometimes being a landlord can be like being an adult babysitter. You got to chase people down for rent. You got to do certain things. You got to attend to the maintenance and the repairs. With lease options, if you sell a home on a lease option, you have the ability to be basically like a standoff landlord. The tenant buyers, they're responsible for the house from soup to nuts, and anything that they want to do to it, they're allowed to do. So when it comes down to buying the house, what is the best way to buy a house and then be profitable with a lease option? That is actually the main key of the puzzle. Is when you do a lease option, it's not just about selling the house on a lease option and being profitable. It's also how you buy it. So all of our homes that we put a lease option tenant buyer in, we typically buy with creative financing. We buy those houses with little to no money down, so we get into them with a very low entry cost. So with that being said, our typical entry cost, at least for the ones that we keep, are anywhere between $4,000 to $8,000. So typically closing costs and maybe a little bit to the seller for moving costs. All the other ones, unless it's like a slam dunk multifamily or something like that, we typically will assign. So once we buy that house with creative financing, what we do is we have another business where we look to help people go from renters to being homeowners, also known as a lease option. Now, why did we choose this method over just putting a normal tenant into these homes with low entry fee? Well, one, if we're doing business from afar, and we are doing business in multiple states, in multiple different markets, that means that we're going to have boots on the ground in all of those towns, those markets, those areas to make sure that they manage the home. Now, with the lease option, like I said, the tenant buyer is fully responsible for the house. There's no need for a property manager. We're not responsible for any leaks. We're not responsible for if things break. The only thing we're responsible is to make sure that they stay on track with their goal to buy the house from us and to collect the rent every month. Now, how do we make sure that we're profitable on all ends? With a lease option, instead of getting a down payment, or excuse me, instead of getting a security deposit, we get what's called a down payment. So typically that down payment is 10% of whatever we sell the home to the tenant buyer for. So if we bought the house for say 130,000, which this is a real life example, we bought a house for $130,000. We sold it to a tenant buyer for 179.9. They had to give us 10% down of the 179.9. So they gave us a $17,000 down payment to move in. Our entry fee, inclusive of closing costs and holding costs, was about $9,800. So within 3 months of closing on the house, we had already made a little less than $9,000 on the house. So our cash on cash return was immediately infinite. Everything that we make every month now is just straight profit into our pockets. The money that they give us every month is just straight rent. It does not go towards the purchase price. It does not go towards anything else. The reason that we do this way is because it creates an incentive for the tenant buyer to buy the house from us. If it was going towards the purchase price, it wouldn't. They would just be paying down their loan, and there would be no sense to work with a bank. So what we do is during that time period, we put them through credit repair, and then we also help them get approved for a mortgage once their credit is at a good standing. So once they buy the house from us, what happens? So that's when we make a big back end check. So they've been paying down our debt on the creative financing loan, whether that was a subject to wrap, seller financing, whatever it may be. As they're paying down the debt, our equity continues to grow. So when they buy the house from us, now we're getting a huge, close to 6-figure check from them. So we were able to profit 3 ways on one small single family house. We were able to get a down payment up front to get all of our money back and recoup our money from the entry. We're able to cash flow every month, and we were able to make pretty much a big back end check, like a flip. So instead of just putting a regular tenant in there, getting your small monthly cash flow every month, and maybe your cash on cash return is 20-30% if it's a really, really slam dunk rental. This way, we are able to BRRRR without using any banks. We don't have to put any money into it, and we don't have to use any of our own credit. We're able to get all of our money back up front, cash flow, and then make a flip check or a cash out refinance check like a BRRRR investor would. So that is one of the main reasons that we do this. Now, why or how do we find a tenant buyer? How do we make sure that this is all going to work out? We're not going to put a tenant buyer in there and then have to kick them out and not give them back their deposit. That's really not the end goal. The end goal is to really make sure that the American dream comes true for these people as well. So we use a third-party company. Their names are screenthetenant.com. They do everything from soup to nuts with these people, debt to income, the whole nine. And they really help us put a good gauge on if these people would, this family, whatever it may be, a couple, would be a good fit for the house, right? So they help them. They have an in-house credit repair program, and I'm not getting any money for shouting them out. I just really like to give people credit when it's due. They have helped us so many times with tenant buyers. They do all the background and legwork for us, and they really honestly make our lives a ton easier. So Paul and his wife Diane are the owners, and Michelle is their administrator. Those 3 are the best. We literally are on the phone with them probably once a month, and they have helped us endlessly. As I mentioned, and for all the new people who are here, we have absolutely no responsibility for the house once those tenant buyers move in. They give us that down payment. They sign what's called a regular residential lease, and they also sign an addendum called a lease option, meaning that they have the option to buy the house during a set period of time. Our typical time frame that we give them is anywhere between 24 to 36 months. So at the end of that time frame, if they still can't buy the house from us, we'll have a sit-down conversation with them and see what's holding them up. If they're close to being able to purchase it, we'll let them continue to go until they can cash us out. If they didn't follow any of our, like the protocol, there's like a strict regimen that they have to follow. If they didn't follow any of it and they're not anywhere close, we would probably ask them to leave. That's worst case scenario, not really something we would like to do, but it's just part of the process. So how do we also make increased cash flow with these lease options? So one of our properties, it would normally rent for about $1,100, but our rent's actually $1,400. So how are we able to get higher rents without price gouging or charging unfair rent rates? So what we do is we offer an incentive to them. The rental rate is $1,100 a month, but if you need help with a down payment, if you can't give us the $17,000 down and you can only give us $14,000 down, how much can you pay over the monthly rent? Well, you could pay $300 over the monthly rent. So now what you did is you still collected a large down payment up front, and now you just increased your monthly cash flow. And anything over the monthly rent, we will credit to their account that is for the down payment. But that just increases our profitability every month. And if they're in there for 24 months, 36 months, it only also helps them because they're increasing the amount of money that they can put down on a mortgage, which will increase their likelihood for getting approved sooner. So it's all of a win-win situation for everybody. We get to reap the benefits of a higher monthly rent. they get to reap the benefits of having more of a credit when they go apply for a mortgage, and hopefully achieving that much sooner than they would if they just gave us one lump sum down payment. And that was it. So with that being said, guys, how do you buy a house with a lease option? This is where I typically do not like to do this. The only way we would ever do this if it was a slam dunk deal, and the seller's only objection was that the deed transferred. I typically don't like these. Most other investors typically don't like to buy these either, because you don't have ownership of the home. You may have control, but you don't have ownership. So as an investor, and when you're writing up a deal, a seller may say, hey, I don't feel comfortable. I love the terms, but I don't feel comfortable with the deed transfer. So that's when we offer the lease option. We can still buy the house subject to, but the deed stays in their name. We take over their payments and everything, or we can pay them a monthly payment if there is no mortgage on the house. We still have full control. We still can put a tenant buyer in there, and we can still do all the things that we would have done if the deed transferred. Now, why do I not like doing the lease option? The reason being is because if we don't decide to keep the deal and we decide to assign it, it is way harder to assign a lease option than it is to assign a creative financing contract. Now, a lease option is a form of creative financing, but with all other creative financing, the deed does transfer. Not many investors are going to want to take over a contract. It's basically just a residential lease with an addendum to it. So they're not going to want to pay $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 assignment fee for a residential lease where they can control property. They're going to want the ownership of the home. So it kind of puts you in a situation where you may only have one option, which is to take it down yourself. And even at that point, you still don't have full control of the home, in the sense where the deed is not in your name until you can buy them out down the road. So I think, to touch on your point, Richard, I think where Pace is saying that there's a lot of money to be left on the table sometimes with lease options. Reason being is, one, because of it's very hard to assign them. And two, when you buy with a lease option, sometimes the terms aren't as much in your favor as they would be if you're buying direct subject to, or with seller financing and so on and so forth. Because when you buy with a lease option, and let's just say the house has no mortgage on it, that landlord, or that basically what they are, is going to want a pretty much a high monthly rent unless you can negotiate that down. And that's honestly what we have seen. They treat it more as a rental than they do as a sale or an investment.